Welcome back, everybody, to another edition of the Junkyard Dawgcast. I'm your host, Jordan Hill. With me this week is Kip Adams. We had a little bit of a break, had a busy week last week with National Signing Day, the February edition, and had a little bit of travel with the Auburn, Georgia men's basketball game. Went out there to the Plains and took that one in and wrote a little bit about that. But we are back and better than ever. A lot to talk about, a lot to tackle this week. Kip, how is this week treating you as we get back into form with another podcast?
Yeah, like most Georgia fans, I slept through National Signing Day. I think, about 3 or 4 o'clock rolled around and, we decided nothing's going to happen today. So, Rusty and I said we'd kind of seen it all through our 15, 16 signing days we'd been through to date. And, well, this was still a new experience for us where just absolutely nothing happened, so I'd like to say it was refreshing, but we still gotta, check and see and be prepared for anything. And then, the offensive lineman Jamal Merriweather out of Brunswick in my hometown, representing Glenn County there, signed the next day. So, he still had some news to cover that week. But yeah, kind of this is our chance to catch our breath a little bit or reflect on what we've seen, but also get prepared because spring practice is right around the corner. So this is kind of, I guess, when people tell us, when do things kind of calm down, I guess we're kind of in that little lull right now. And the coaches are as well. I'm sure they're all skiing, whether that's water skiing or, getting that snowboard out, on the bunny slopes. I think that's kind of what the coaching staff's doing right now. And we're not doing that. We're here to still talk about Georgia sports and Georgia football, but yeah, there's still plenty to talk about. And we never really caught our breath. It's a whirlwind. Once the season starts getting into the postseason, it's everything's kind of happening at the same time. Recruiting cranks it up a notch at the same time that now under Kirby Smart, Georgia's playing, really, really important football games. So it's kind of a very weird, a lot of people would say just scheduling error that we have everything like that happening all at once. And for us, we're just trying to cover it as best we can. And now just get ready to do it all over again.
Talking season definitely never ends, and you talk about the coaches being out and about, and maybe they have something planned. But I'll tell you, someone who is not far from Athens is Kirby Smart. He was on the sideline for the basketball game, had courtside seats with Mary Beth and Andrew taking in that game, and talk a little bit about that to wrap up the episode. But this is going to be primarily a mailbag episode. We got a lot of questions, and if you're watching this live, if you have questions, drop them in the comments. We always like getting a good mix of questions from the junkyard, but also questions from the people who are tuning in live. But before we do that, I do want to tackle some of the stuff that has happened in the last week. And let's start with that signing day. We mentioned it. Jamal Merriweather is the only player who signs for Georgia. He actually signs the day after, makes it official. I'm still waiting to hear about Deuce Robinson. It sounds like maybe in April he may have a decision on where he's going. The other player that we were looking at as a potential addition for Georgia was another tight end, Walker Lyons. He signs with USC, decides he's going to stay out there on the West Coast. Kip, what did you make of the fact that there wasn't a whole lot of moves made by Georgia? Obviously, they already had the number 2 class, but the fact that they wound up adding one guy and are kind of waiting to see what happens with another, but on the whole, that it was a pretty quiet week.
Yeah, and as it should be, that's what you want. You want to land all your targets in December. That's when most of them do it now. And in the end, it just comes down to a couple spots, and you save those for elite prospects. And Deuce Robinson, he admits himself, his recruitment's a little different with him potentially being a high Major League Baseball draft pick. He's trying to make that decision, knowing that the draft isn't until I think July this year. And then knowing that the signing deadline, if you're going to actually sign a letter of intent, that deadline, I believe, is April 1st. And I think covering Demetrius Robinson, that was one of those where it went right down kind of to the deadline. And then we find out, he's not signing that. He's going to sign financial aid paper. That kind of is, you start looking at that calendar and you're like, if he's going to sign those traditional letters of intent and he's got to do so by April, that's what he's saying right now, that he intends on doing that. So I guess for him, it's it's about finding out where that draft stock is. But at the same time, I think when the Major League Baseball draft is not until July, and you right now you plan on signing, I think it's just kind of one of those things where you sign somewhere. If you get drafted, you get drafted. You're still able to go to to the major leagues if if you sign a letter of intent. So I think he kind of knows that now. Like he's able to wait. Georgia, USC, Texas, those programs are going to hold a spot for him. So I think right now, if you're Georgia, you still feel pretty good about where you are with Deuce Robinson. I think right now I would still give them the edge. He's an elite talent. Georgia's already signed an elite class. Again, number 2 in the class rankings, and an outstanding group from top to bottom. I think it's second or third best class that Kirby Smart's ever signed. I think second. A top 15 class overall right now. If you just look at 24/7 Sports history, I believe it's either 14th or 15th, depending on you look at USC's, I think 2007 class, that might be 14th. But again, like I said, all time top 15 class overall. That's the kind of incoming group of talent that can help you compete for championships. And with, I think, 18 of them already being on campus, it's such a huge boost. Last year they set the program record, I believe, with 18 early enrollees. Match it this cycle. It's big. It just really helps these guys, and a lot of these guys are going to get a chance to get some significant snaps with injuries and the off-season surgeries that some guys have. You're able to kind of come in and really step into an important role and audition, see if you can play an important role in year one for a team that we think will once again be ranked very high in all the offseason rankings, top 3, number 1, regardless. I think Georgia has made sure that roster is set up to be one of the best in college football for the next couple of years.
Not too shabby to just, just get another top 15 class of all time. No big deal there. Nothing to roll your eyes at. One of the things that's nice about, this time of year and when we do these podcasts is that sometimes there's news that happens in the hours and minutes leading up to the podcast. I want to make sure and mention this too. We're recording this on Wednesday, just past 2 p.m. Eastern time. So earlier today, we found out 12 Georgia players are going to be headed to the Combine. They've been invited to participate in the Combine. Run through those names real quick. Quarterback Stetson Bennett, running back Kenny McIntosh, wide receiver Kieras Jackson, tight end Darnell Washington, offensive lineman Broderick Jones and Warren McClendon, defensive tackle Jalen Carter, outside linebackers Robert Bill and Nolan Smith, corner Keely Ringo, safety Chris Smith, and kicker Jack Podlesny. That was all but one player who has declared from Georgia, the other being offensive lineman Warren Erickson. And I think, again, you got another really good group for Georgia that's going to be going. Georgia was sort of the talk of last year's Combine. They really stole the show with how everybody played. I mean, I think even Jake Camarda, the punter, all of a sudden he was getting compared to his 40 time to some of the quarterbacks from past years. So, I don't think it'll be quite at that level just because of the talent that was in that group. The fact that 5 defenders wound up going in the first round of last year's draft. But this is still going to be a really, really strong group. I think there will be a lot of anticipation on what Stetson's able to do there. Obviously, everybody will be watching Jalen Carter because he does have a very good chance to be the number 1 overall pick. Again, it may not be to the level that it was in 2022, but I think these guys will represent Georgia well and get plenty of buzz coming out of this. Kip, what are your thoughts on this group, this dozen dogs that are going to be getting ready to go to Indianapolis?
Yeah, unless the Bears trade that number 1 overall pick, I would say that right now you got to give Jalen Carter at worst 50-50 odds of being the number 1 overall pick. You got to, obviously Will Anderson, the edge from Alabama, is going to be in the mix for that too. But I like where Jalen Carter sits. Anytime number 1 overall picks in back-to-back drafts, it's just kind of just another, feather in Georgia's cap, which again, last year broke records left and right. This year, going to be able to potentially have that as far as the recruiting trails, especially, you look at Trey Scott, he's going to be able to say, I number 1 overall draft pick back-to-back years. And then, if I look at this group, Erickson not being invited, even though he wasn't, a starter this year was somewhat surprising. I think he's got a draftable grade and might, get drafted ahead of 1 or 2 of the other guys that were invited from Georgia in this Combine class. I'm thinking 8 guys are in really good shape to get drafted out of this group. If you look at Jalen Carter, Broderick Jones, Keely Ringo, Darnell Washington, Chris Smith, Kenny McIntosh, Warren McClendon, and Nolan Smith, those guys, we like their chances. And then you kind of just get to some coin flip guys. And I know you already said on the Junkyard, you feel pretty good about Stetson Bennett getting drafted. And then you have, again, Robert Beal. You talked about Pod and Warren Erickson, Karis Jackson as well. I think those are all kind of coin flip guys. Once you get outside the top 150, it all comes down to each team's board. Stetson playing that premium position probably gives them a pretty good chance. It's also a position, again, that doesn't, get only one guy plays. It's different than kind of offensive line, wide receiver, defensive back. So that might go against him as well based on his draft grade. But I think there's a good chance you get 2 of those guys drafted, gives Georgia 10. 10 is the safe bet right now for Georgia. And you look at last year's draft, Georgia with 15 draft picks, 25 draft picks in 2 years is incredible. And then you also just think about the fact that LSU was second last year with 10. So, we're not looking at a situation where Georgia really fell back. They'll probably be in the top 2 or 3 programs in draft picks this year as well. So I think it's just incredibly impressive by Kirby Smart and that coaching staff on the recruiting trails, and then also just developing, because that was something that Georgia, he always talked about Georgia underachieving, Georgia's recruiting classes not, coming to fruition. Well, now they are. And again, like we said, it's one less thing that can be recruited against Georgia. You're really running out of things you could say about Georgia negatively on the recruiting trails right now.
Yeah, talking about Stetson and his chances, and I think we might have talked about this on the last podcast. I would have to say that he probably should send a thank you card to Brock Purdy, because I think some of these teams in the 6th, 7th round, if he's still on the board, which my guess is he probably goes in the 4th or 5th round, but that if he's still there that late, someone's going to say, hey, we've seen some of these late round quarterbacks really shine. Let's take a chance. So we'll see, and obviously we'll be all over that by the time we get to April and the draft. Got a lot of questions, but we're going to take a break first and come back, start answering your questions on a number of topics. But first, we'll take a quick break. Welcome back, everybody. And before we get into these questions, I wanted to mention, and I didn't write the username down, but someone asked for us to go back and look at our preseason predictions on statistics. And I'll try to gather those up from before the season. And hopefully next week, that'll be one of our podcasts. We can kind of dive through them and see who was right and who missed the mark a little bit. Not feeling real great at looking at those, but we'll see and figure out how we did. But we'll get into some of these questions that we are ready for. High Standard asks, which position group did the Dogs hit on the most in the 23 class? Which group do they need to focus on for 24? I'll start with this, Kip. Had a second to kind of think and look through the numbers and see where everything played out. I would say the position group they did the best with, I would say, would be inside linebacker. I mean, they've got 3 of the best inside linebackers in the country with Raylan Wilson, CJ Allen, Troy Bowles. I think they did an excellent job there. Wide receiver as well, and there were questions kind of going into the latter part of that recruiting cycle. How was this going to shape up? Was Georgia going to be able to get the receivers they needed, especially going into this class? They knew receiver was a big need going in for the 2023 season. Tyler Williams, Anthony Evans, Yazid Haynes, I really like what they got there. For 24, I would say quarterback's a big one because right now they're at 3 scholarship quarterbacks. Who knows if that's going to be the case even by the time they go into the season. So obviously they have got Ryan Puglisi. You're also looking at Dylan Raiola as a real possibility, and obviously we'll watch to see if that happens. And besides that, I would say probably to watch 2 defensive end. It seemed like some of those 5 technique guys, weren't quite able to land some of those guys, and they've got some really talented edge rushers that could wind up getting, putting their hand in the dirt and playing there, or standing up playing outside linebacker. So, guys like a Samuel Mpemba and some of the other guys they got, maybe they decide their best fit for defensive end. That would be a position I would watch as well in 2024. Kip, what do you think they did the best as far as the talent they got in 23 and the positions they really need to take care of in this next cycle?
It's really hard to bet against the trio that Glenn Schumann brought in. I think, other than maybe like Anthony Hill, they brought in the three best inside linebackers, I think, in the entire country. And they each just have such versatile skill sets. And, already one of them getting called out by Kirby Smart in this post-national championship press conference, at the end of the press conference, not being asked anything, to call out CJ Allen for the job he did on scout team when the guy had a week, maybe 2 weeks to less than 10 days, single-digit days of practice to go out there and be TCU's starting inside linebacker, and to get a call out from Kirby Smart after the national championship game. Well, it was just an incredible, quote by Kirby Smart, just to say that he did it better than they did it, or did it as well as they did it. For CJ Allen, who some people think might be the third most talented inside linebacker they got, just because Raylan Wilson just has that NFL, he checks all the boxes from a standpoint of a guy that's going to be able to play on Sundays. And then also just, looking at the group in general and looking at a guy like Troy Bowles, whose father obviously is an NFL coach and also checks all the boxes as well. That group is just outstanding. But, I like the edge trio, and they needed it. That was a group that a position that they were hurting for last year. Nolan Smith got hurt. Robert Bill got asked to do a lot. They had to basically change the looks they were giving because, they aren't able to dial up the same kind of pressures with the guys they had. Those guys are gone. You needed talent, and you signed three guys who are among the top 75 overall prospects in the country, including maybe the best edge guy in the class, and Damon Wilson, a top 20 guy in the country, with like you said, Samuel Mpemba and Gabe Harris. Those are both top 70 overall prospects in the country. And you needed that. So while I think that linebacker trio, probably just overall the three guys are elite at their position, as far as just needing to get help at the edge defender position, more, the last couple of classes haven't really, brought forth the impact that they were looking for. This trio has a chance to come in and play really important roles. And the fact, again, that all three of them are already on campus, and we know Marvin Jones Jr. is coming off that surgery. So they're going to get a chance, right there, day one in practice, to show we can play an important role in year one. And so I'm really looking to see what that group can do when spring football comes around, because I just know that those are guys that were coveted nationally. And I think that you look at, this coaching staff, they were able to bring in three really, really talented guys after losing that position coach and Dan Lanning in the offseason. So, outstanding group, but job by that guys. And then looking to next year, I agree with you. 5 technique is really important. Like I said with edge, you're looking at that defensive end position at Georgia, and it's razor thin. If Tramel Walthor isn't coming back, you don't have like a 6-year guy in that role. You're moving guys around from the defensive tackle and nose tackle position, which they rotate those guys already, but you don't have a lot of guys that can play that position and play it to the way that you want them to do. So I think you look at next year and you look at some of those defensive line targets like Edric Houston from Buford, a 5-star guy. They're extending more offers every week at that position because they're going to have to take 2, if not 3 guys at the 5 technique position alone just to fill the need in this class. It's going to be real big. And then also, I just think the offensive line, you start looking ahead to the guys that are leaving. And, the fact that you're able to get a Cedric Van Pran back was huge. The fact that you have, your starting interior offensive line back, huge. But you're going to be losing a lot of guys. Cedric Van Pran is going to be gone. That Tate Ratledge is going to have the opportunity to leave. You know that Xavier Truss is going to be gone. You know that Marius Mims is going to have a chance to leave and probably will as well. So you're probably going to be replacing 3, if not 4 starters along your offensive line. Obviously, you're probably going to have guys on campus to fill those roles, but you got to retool there. So not just an offensive tackle, offensive guard and center. You got to definitely sign a full class, and it's a position over a group overall that kind of down nationally. So that you look at Stacey Searles in his first full cycle here. He's going to have a tall task ahead of him, but I think you looked at the group he brought in last year. He showed that he could still recruit at a high level, and I think that's going to be a position group that he has to go nationally to fulfill his needs for the next cycle.
Yeah, I wanted to make sure and call out Brad Newsom in the comments who said we need more 4- and 5-star offensive linemen in 2024. And I think he's exactly right. And Kip, you talked about that. But I look at the depth going into 2023. I mean, there are some questions behind some of these guys. We really think probably Amarius Mims and Ernest Green, they look like they're probably going to be your starting offensive tackles. The question is sort of those guys behind, is a true freshman like Monroe Freeling going to be in the mix as far as the twos go? A guy like Austin Blasky, who's moved around the offensive line and has played center some. I mean, you don't have a lot of sure things behind them. And again, they did add some decent tackle depth, but some of those guys are true freshmen. And you definitely don't want to be in a situation where, say, somebody gets hurt, where all of a sudden, and if you're in a big game, say you're on the road, and all of a sudden you're turning into a true freshman, that would be a lot to ask of a guy, and it's only going to get worse after the 2023 season, just knowing what they're going to lose.
Blasky's huge spring for him, and like you said, you talk about the road. Can you even, do you even have the roster spots to bring guys like that? You don't want to do that. So I think he's going to have a really important role this season. If he's not starting, if they're going with a guy like Amarius Mims and Ernest Green at left or right tackle, he's going to be not only the swing guy there, but he could be the backup, center. He could be the number 2 guy at basically all 5 positions along the offensive line. So definitely a big spring for him. And then, Dylan Fairchild's a guy that I think you start looking at your guard positions, Xavier Truss, Tate Ratledge, feel pretty good about those guys. But I think maybe Dylan Fairchild might be that next guy to kind of push both of them. And again, injuries happen. I think he's kind of that next guy up there. And then, at center, I think Blasky's probably going to be that number 2 guy. And I think he's, again, could be the most important offensive lineman in this group just because of that versatility. I think by the end of the season, he basically has a starter's amount of snaps just because he's going to be stepping in for, possibly at all 5 positions, which truly unique. But when you sign guys like that, and we talk about that versatility and cross training, I really think that's going to be pivotal for him in Georgia this season.
Yeah, he's a guy that could be very valuable, especially just giving guys some breaks and getting a chance to play at different positions. Stay with another recruiting question. This one from Big Dog 342. Do you see us taking 3 running backs in this class as far as the 24 class? So to get everybody up to speed to this point, Georgia has 2 commits: Dwight Phillips Jr. and Tavani Mizell. I should say 2 commits at the running back position. Going into this season, they've got 5 scholarship running backs. Got Kendall Milton, Dejon Edwards, Branson Robinson, Andrew Paul, and then Roderick Robinson, who is the freshman that they signed in the 23 cycle. You would think probably Kendall Milton and Dejon will probably move on after this coming season. I believe they'll both be seniors. So it opens up and gives you 3 scholarship guys. My thought on where this stands as far as running back, I think they'll probably try to sign 2 running backs. I saw people saying, well, could they get 3 or will it be 2 and maybe one of those guys who's not committed winds up not signing? I don't know anything about specifically those 2 guys, but we are still very early in this cycle. You will see guys with all these schools, guys who have committed, guys who decide to decommit, go elsewhere as the cycle goes along. I think they'll sign 2 running backs. Will it be the 2 that are committed right now? I think it's too early to say. But I think at the end of the day, they will go into this class, add 2 more running backs, and then move it along, make sure. Again, we saw even this past season how important that running back depth was. They lose Andrew Paul during fall camp. You get Kenny McIntosh banged up. He kind of plays through it. You got Kendall Milton hurt, and he misses a few games. You got to have guys you can count on to take carries, because if you get into SEC games and cannot run the football because you don't have the guys, you're going to be in real trouble.
Yeah, I think, like you said, they're going to sign 2 this cycle. I don't think they'll sign 3. Obviously, Dwight Phillips is a guy that's very versatile, and his speed is, allows him to do a lot of different things for you. And, that versatility is going to help him. But I think, he sticks at running back. I think they think that he can get, up to 180, 185 pounds coming in, maybe play up to 190 pounds in college, and kind of be that Sony Michel type player for them. And so if I'm looking at this running back class, I also know that Dell McGee is still after Jarrett Gibson. Happens to be the number 1 overall running back in the country. Not the type of guy that you're going to say no to. And then also, we saw last month when the coaches were on the road, they made sure to visit Chauncey Bowens, the running back out of the Benjamin School in North Palm Beach, Florida, who happens to be committed to Florida. And then right after that helicopter visit from Kirby Smart at the high school, made a visit to Georgia and said he's coming back. That's something to definitely keep an eye on. I think, again, in recruiting now, you have to just continue to recruit throughout the cycle. And especially here we are in February, just a week off of the National Signing Day for the last cycle. You can't really think about, I have this many spots filled, because they have no spots filled right now. They do have verbal commitments from 2 running backs. They're going to sign 2 running backs. Will they be the same names they have on the commitment list right now? It's way too early to say. I just know that Dell McGee is a really important class for him. And I think he signs 2 guys, and probably 2 guys end up ranked in the top 10 at their position when all is said and done in this class.
Another question on here from Flood the Swamp, who asks, it's been on the board, but would love your opinion on how UGA replaces the receiving threat out of the backfield this season, since Kenny McIntosh and James Cook are both gone. Kip, what are your thoughts? I can kind of chip in once you sort of give your take, but losing a huge weapon in Kenny McIntosh, and obviously it's going to be something that's going to be tough to fill when you go into a new season.
I think, again, as of we're recording this podcast, Todd Monken is the offensive coordinator at Georgia. We'll see if the NFL continues to, try to call and snag him away. But the one thing I know that he does is he models his playbook after the personnel. And we've seen this question a lot on the Junkyard. How are you going to replace Kenny McIntosh? Where are they going to get those receptions from out of the backfield? And I think my answer to that is, while they will look and see what guys like Dijon Edwards will see, if, a healthy Andrew Paul, how Roderick Robinson can handle that, what Kendall Milton can do. My opinion is that you adjust the playbook. You're going to see more guys out of the slot getting passes. You bring in a guy like Dominic Levitt, a weapon that's a little different than what you've had on campus. You have an elite pass catcher in Brock Bowers. You also have a guy in Oscar Delp, who, again, in year 2, he's more of a receiving threat. He got asked to play the Darnell Washington role late last season when he got hurt, because that was kind of the playbook they had. You can't switch it up that late in the season, but in the offseason, you're able to do a full install. And, if he's going to be one of your top weapons, then, again, he's going to get targets. So, in my opinion, you might not have I feel pretty confident you're not going to have a running back with over 40 catches. You might not have a running back with over 30 receptions this year. You might have a guy in the low 20s as your top running back as far as catching passes, because those passes are going to go to other positions. You're going to spread the ball out more. Your wide receivers are going to become a more increased part of the offense, as well as you have Dylan Bell going into year 2. You have Marcus Rosemary-Jack Saint. You always have Lab McConkey. You have your incoming wide receiver trio that you talked about before, and you possibly have a healthy Arian Smith. So if you have all these weapons, you're going to feature them. And I just think that maybe that aspect of Georgia's offense isn't there this year, just based on the personnel that they have, because I don't think running backs that can do what Kenny McIntosh did are that common. It's why he's one of the only guys in the last 20 years to be as productive as a running back and as a pass catcher. And so, yeah, Georgia had Sony Michel. They had Kenny McIntosh, those guys. They're going to have different guys that are going to get the ball in different ways next season.
I think you hit the nail on the head, and it's sort of a situation where you don't want to try to put a square peg into a round hole because you use your strengths, and obviously Tom Munkin is um, well established and deserves the attention he's gotten by using the most of the personnel he's got. And I think you're right. If you don't have those kind of backs that can catch the ball, which I think you still will try to get those guys to develop that part of their game and to try to grow in those ways, but I'm not expecting to see someone like Kendall Milton lining up out wide and getting a lot of passes in a game just because that's not what he's best at. I think that Todd Monken is going to put these guys in a position to succeed and try to maximize their ability on the field. Kip, I think we would be remiss not to take this question talking about Todd Monken. Hooper G Dog asks if Monken leaves, who is on the JD Hill and K Adams OC boards that you would go after. I'll go first, and we've kind of talked about this just a little because obviously we know there have been interviews done. Todd has done interviews with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, with the Baltimore Ravens as well. And I think I'm kind of the mindset, let's say Todd Monken does leave. I say you try to stick with a piece of the staff that's already in place. It's sort of a don't fix what isn't broken. And to me, you could kind of go a number of different ways with that. You could go bring back Buster Faulkner from Georgia Tech. The one caveat with that is he's never called plays at the Power 5 level. And maybe he decides he wants to stay in Atlanta and try to be part of that. People aren't going to like it, but I don't think Mike Bobo would be a bad choice. He's obviously got the experience. I think he's got the trust of the coaching staff. And Todd Monken applauded him a ton in the build up to the Peach Bowl and also the national title game in moments where, he wasn't specifically asked about Mike. It wasn't a situation where it's like, well, I got to talk about Mike Bobo now because I've been asked about him. He's talked about support staff and the people around him and been sure to, pat Mike on the back and compliment him for what he's done. But you could go other ways as well. Brian McClendon's a guy that's been an offensive coordinator at the Power 5 level. Do you promote Todd Hartley and say, okay, you've done an outstanding job as a recruiter and obviously coaching these tight ends. Let's add something more to your plate and give him the opportunity there. You can go a number of different ways. I think if it were up to me, I would look at who has been a part of the staff and part of the success that they have had in the last few years and say, okay, we're going to put more on your plate, making sure to really keep that the ability that this staff has had to work together. That's what's been talked about so much with some of the staff members that we've talked to during the playoff run. Kirby's talked about it as well. How good this staff has worked together. And if you do lose Todd Monken, that's going to be a huge loss. But I think you could do much worse than to look around at the staff and elevate someone to take on that role and really keeping those guys who work together so well, continuing that going forward.
I like it. I think, again, we'd be kidding ourselves if we didn't say if Monken leaves, it's probably Mike Bobo's job to lose. I mean, he wasn't brought in again to just to sit back and watch. I think, again, he's still one of the best offensive minds in college football. Has never had a roster like he would have as the offensive coordinator at Georgia second time around, and it never had the defense that he had. He used to, they asked him to go out there and score 38 points a game because it was going to be 38-35. The defense struggled a lot of times under him and put him in very nefarious situations when he was an offensive coordinator. I think that he will get that first call and probably have that interview. Obviously, Kirby Smart knows him well and knows he can plug him right in. If they're going to go outside the program, I think I mentioned to you, I like Alex Atkins, the offensive coordinator at Florida State. I just think what he has done there and how he uses not just the tight end position, but also the running backs, the way that he does inside-outside zone there. His background as an offensive line coach, the line of scrimmage being important as well, and his ability to recruit the Southeast, his SEC experience. I think that he would be, a guy that would make a lot of sense and would be a great hire for Georgia if they need an offensive coordinator. He's a guy that should be up for most positions, especially in the Southeast. I just think he's the guy that checks a lot of the boxes that you look for. And knowing the Georgia, Florida, the Louisiana, Oklahoma, Texas area, I think that he would do very well in that aspect. And I think he has just a balanced offensive attack. And so I think that would be a great hire. I think he was a guy that was heavily in the mix the first time around. And again, he's impressed. What he did last year at Florida State, I believe he was a Broyles Award finalist. And he is an up-and-comer. I think his best years are still ahead of him, and he would be able to do very, very well in Georgia's offense.
Yeah, I think before long, Alex Atkins is going to be a head coach somewhere. And he was someone that was talked about briefly when Matt Luke resigned at Georgia. Some people wondered if he could be an option, but he's done an outstanding job in Tallahassee. And I think he's a name that more and more people in college football are going to come to know just over the next few years. I think he's got a very bright future ahead of him. Kip, we are going to wrap up the question and answer portion of this podcast with the most important one. Mr. Medium Rare asks, if you all had to choose only one food to eat for the rest of your life, what would it be? Kip, I'm going to start with you.
All right. So immediately I just want to say pizza. Like that's my first reaction hearing that question. But as someone who has watched as his metabolism has completely evaporated over the last 5-6 years, probably longer. I just noticed it in the last 5 years. I have to go, with something I think could have, some semblance of health if I'm eating it every day for the rest of my life. I don't think the question was could eat it every day and not have to buy a new wardrobe. So for me, I'm thinking probably, Thai food. Are we allowed to pick a region? Does it have to be a dish? Like, can I mix in curry with a little bit of like Laotian, like larb type thing, try to mix it up? Or do I just eat sashimi every day? I think it's got to be something like that. Or maybe I just go Greek. Maybe in the end, I'm thinking about this. I can eat gyros, some tzatziki sauce, some kebabs. I think that might be. I think that's part of the Mediterranean diet, right? So I'm going to stick with that as something I could eat every day the rest of my life. Maybe cheating a little bit on the answer, but it's such a broad question that as much as I want to say pizza, I think having some sort of semblance of balance might do me well over the long run.
Yeah, I didn't put quite as much thought into it because my thought is, well, I mean, it says only food for the rest of your life. It doesn't say, and you have to live 20, 30 more years. I mean, maybe I make it, another year and a half. I think I'm sticking with going with Mr. Medium Rare's feel. I'm going to go steak. I'd say second place would probably just be barbecue. I'm a big pork barbecue guy. That's usually my go-to, but I'm going to just say a nice New York strip every day. Again, I may not make it, but with steak, you diversify your options. You can make it a sandwich. You can have steak and eggs for breakfast. Again, I may not be making it to 85, eating a steak for every single meal. But brother, I'm going to go out with a smile on my face. I can promise you that.
You could put anything on a pizza, right? So, I mean, I'll go back to pizza. It might have to be cauliflower pizza toward the end, but I'm
Nice,
gonna go.
nice veggie. Nice
I'm
veggie
gonna
in
put
there.
lots of buffalo chicken on there. I'll go through every single region of food. Mexican pizza, it's all on there. So I guess pizza probably is. I'll just circle back and make it work. Whether that gives me 2 or 5 years, like you said, probably not too long. But hey, you never know how long you have, so I'll make the most of it. So circle right back around the pizza. Thanks for talking me into it.
Not here for a long time. I'm here for a good time there, Kip. We'll do the men's basketball minute real quick. Rough times for Georgia men's basketball. They are now 14-10 overall, 4-7 in SEC play. Had a really rough stretch. They have now lost 6 of their last 7. Lost what really felt like a much needed win against Ole Miss at home on Tuesday night. A game where you got really good production out of Braylon Bridges. And Kerry Oquendo having a really good game as well with Terry Roberts unavailable. They can't get the stops they had to have down the stretch. They lose that one. They play Kentucky on Saturday. Shield your eyes. Oscar Sheboy is going to just come through and probably have a really big game once again. It's going to be a really rough, I think, close to SEC play for Georgia because you've got Kentucky on Saturday. You play LSU on Valentine's Day, Tuesday night. You've got at Alabama, at Arkansas, Missouri at home, Florida at home, and then at South Carolina. Wins are going to be very hard to come by to end this season. I don't think the record is going to be what people wanted, but honestly, it's not going to be that far off of what I was sort of anticipating before the year. Again, at the end of the day, this team just didn't have really the bigs that they had to have, the forwards and the center presence to hang with some of these teams. And it's no secret. I know a lot of people are upset, but that's the way it is. But they've gotten some really talented guys. They've gotten Dylan James that's going to be coming in. With the 2024 class, they can go in the portal, try to get more. Actually, I should say he's in the 2023 class. Going after some talented guys in that 2024 class, the number one guy being Asa Newell, who has a chance to be the number one recruit in that cycle by the time it's all said and done. His brother's already on the team as a walk-on. I think that's a battle you've got to win if you're Georgia, and obviously there's no shortage of people involved in it, teams like Indiana and several others who are after Asa. But on a positive note, wrote a story on Wednesday about making some changes within Stegman Coliseum, getting the students closer to the floor, having a chance to really get that noise and really make Georgia, help Georgia get a home court advantage. And, I immediately, when they sort of explained the changes that were coming, it made me think of Auburn, the place I came from where I covered sports before, that the jungle is a big deal at Auburn, and it gets loud in that arena, and that's what you want. And I think that they understood Mike White coming in, that there is potential at Georgia, and part of that is getting the crowd into these games and trying to have that effect. I thought it was really interesting. Mike talked about it after the Ole Miss game. Josh Brooks talked about it after the board meeting on Tuesday. A lot of good stuff. I would recommend you guys, if you are basketball fans, go read that story on the board. But tough close to this season looks like is coming. But I think there is reason still for optimism. I don't think everyone should be jumping off the ship quite like, a few people on the board a little bit upset about how things have played out here lately.
Yeah, I think you look at this season, the couple games they'd love to have back. Obviously, the one they just lost really kind of broke down for them at the end. Then you look back at that Vanderbilt game at the end, and then the Georgia Tech game that, frankly, kind of got stolen from them. Winning 2 of those 3 games, maybe it gives them a chance to kind of maybe sneak in as an NIT team. Now we're kind of looking. That last game against us at South Carolina, I believe, to end the regular season, still gives them a chance, to end the season was kind of where we predicted, though. 15 wins was kind of that barometer. We thought they can get to that, which coming off a 6-win season, still a huge jump. But I think, again, you still have that opportunity to kind of end the season on a good note. And, they're probably going to come in pretty battered and bruised after the next couple of games, like you said, Kentucky, LSU, Alabama, and then at Arkansas, Missouri, and Florida. Those are all going to be really tough matchups for Georgia. But like, if they can stay focused, if Mike White can keep the team focused, I think that South Carolina game is a winnable game, and you kind of hit that number that you projected. So a couple ones that they didn't get at the end. Overall, I think that's a season you could still build on for next year.
Absolutely. Well, we're going to wrap up this episode. I do want to, give a shout out to my mom, Debbie Hill. She is retiring after 36 years at the USPS. So I want to make sure and give a shout out to mom. And she's going to get some much needed break. She may be at the beach for a while because she's definitely deserved it. But we're going to wrap up the episode. Thanks, Kip, for popping on. Thanks for everybody who watched this live and who is tuning into it after the fact. We appreciate y'all's support. Keep reading. We're going to have all kinds of stories this week as we wrap up another week, and understand that, on the whole, we're really not that far from spring practice. So plenty to still talk about before it kicks off. So for Kip Adams, I'm Jordan Hill. Thanks for watching and listening. Until next time, take care.